Okay, we're going to be continuing on in. Oh, that's off. We're going to be continuing on in the first book of Yisrayl, in the. Let's see here, in the 5th chapter, and we left off on page 30. But we'll be in chapter 5 here. The clock will start ticking off the last 3.5 years, called the end number 4. Okay, and again, this is from the Feast of Unleavened Bread, 4/23 of 2003. Okay, and again, just to kind of rehearse real quickly, the main subject of the sermons are that all of Yahweh's prophecies will be fulfilled. There is not one single prophecy that will not be fulfilled. They will all be fulfilled. And also what occurs when sin is unrestrained. And we're going to be getting into that this evening a little bit about what occurs when sin is unrestrained. And if you remember kind of just an overview, just real briefly what we covered last week, we covered the 7-year peace plan, how the 7-year peace plan is a plan of action. And we did an overview of really the simplicity that's in Yahweh's plan. Yahweh's plan is simple, and Yahweh allows mankind to choose his own way. He doesn't force anybody to keep his laws. Nobody is forced to go either way. But mankind has a free choice. And Yahweh has allowed mankind to choose the way of unrestrained evil, which is what we're seeing in the world today. And eventually this government, the kingdom of government, is going to be given the power to end this unrestrained evil and the curses that come along with that. And this is what we are training to do. And we're in this last 3.5-year time period now of this training period. We're making an effort to qualify. We're striving to qualify to be a part of that government. And, Pastor, he also covered that this last 3.5 years will be just like the days of Noah. Mankind would be giving in marriage, marrying, giving in marriage, eating, sleeping, and rising up to play, which is all that they do. And we also see that the suffering on the earth is getting worse and worse every day, and it's as a result of sin, the breaking of the law. And these curses they're compounding; they're just piling one on top of another on top of another. And then finally, we covered how Yahweh offers us, a forever life without war, without sickness, without disease, without anything like that. And that's what Yahweh's laws offer. And that's not what they offer just to us, but this is what we're going to be offering to the world. And indeed to the entire universe. And history also, we see, gone through history, history backs up these prophecies. History backs up the prophecies here. So kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of what we went over last week. So we're going to pick up here. Actually, on the bottom of page 30 is where we left off here. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 4, where it says he shows the blessings here, and he shows how blessed will be the fruit of your body. Blessed will be the fruit of your body here. And we see here that the scriptures that we're actually going to be reinforcing are Daniel chapter 7, verse 25 through 27. Keep those in mind. Daniel 9:27, keep that one in mind. And keep Deuteronomy 28, 22 through 24. Keep that in mind also. These are going to be, the subjects that we're going to be covering. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 4, he shows the blessings here. And we see here, it reads here, blessed will be the fruit of your body. The produce of your ground and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. Now, the word fruit there, you see fruit comes from Strong's. It's number 6529 from 6509, and it means fruit. Figuratively or literally, bow, first, fruitful, or reward. And then the fruit of your body. That word body is number 990, and it means the belly, especially from the womb, as they be born within the womb. So it's actually talking about our children here. It says when we keep these laws that our children will be blessed, meaning the children. Right now, the children of the house of Yahweh have been raised up on clean foods and are seeing some of this health. The blessings that come from being raised with a clean diet, free from the defilement of the world, raised with clean hands, served with holy hands. We're seeing the benefit. We see the benefit of that. And Pastor continues here on the top of page 31. He shows us here the world right now is suffering. He says he shows that the world is suffering. Now, the word suffering, what is suffering? If you take a look at the overhead, suffering, according to Google, is the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. Okay? The pain, or the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. Now, Merriam-Webster shows that there are synonyms that go along, similar words to this suffering. We can see are not only suffering, of course, but you see distress, you see misery, and agony. And what I like about Merriam-Webster is it kind of breaks down and gives a little bit of a definition of how these words relate. And suffering implies conscious endurance of pain or distress. And distress implies an external and usually temporary cause of great physical or mental stress and strain. Now we see, of course, misery. Now misery, that's one of the things that we see in Genesis chapter 2, or Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2. And the side note, we see that misery stresses, and I'm just going to use the word there that it used, the unhappiness attending especially sickness, notice sickness, poverty, or loss. And this is all what sin brings. Sin brings upon this. It brings upon this unjoyfulness. It brings along this unjoyfulness. It brings along this distress. It brings on this the sickness and the poverty. And then we see agony. You see agony there. It suggests pain that's too intense to be borne. So that's what we see the world is all going through all of this. And we see that, in the news. Now, back to what Pastor shows us here. He says, you read these things in the doctor's reports from the schools about the children younger than 7 years old. You can talk to the doctors here and learn about this. And he shows here, he says, we have a top pediatrician here in the house of Yahweh who can tell you, now mark this next part down here, highlight this next part, who can tell you what the children are being born with right now, out in the world, that is a result of sin. Okay, you can see what the children are being born with right now out in the world that is a result of sin. And Exodus chapter 34, verse 7, if you want to put that down there for a side note, Exodus 34:7 shows how when we keep the laws of Yahweh, that Yahweh keeps mercy for thousands, for forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but by no means leaving, and it reads here, goes unpunished those who are guilty. Now remember, Yahweh's not a vengeful God. He's not setting up, waiting, he's not sitting anywhere waiting to zap anybody with curses, but these are simply the results of breaking the laws of Yahweh that he warns us against. But it shows who, and these sins, that shows here that they visit the sin of the fathers upon the children, and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So you can see here how Yahweh shows that these sins don't just affect the individual committing the sin, that it actually gets into the DNA, it actually gets in and actually affects the children. And it gets into the DNA and it affects for generations down the line, and we see that now. You can see it you can see it right now. But you young people, Pastor shows here, have no excuse for not knowing these things. And young, it doesn't necessarily mean those that are 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, but it can mean those are 99, 109. It covers all of us. It covers everybody. We have no excuse for not knowing these things. The knowledge here is not only in our people, but in the history books and the doctor's records and the science magazines. He says, I can guide you to the article showing what the children of the world are being born with. And mark this next part down again. Mark this next part down too. It says, by the time they start school, they have diseases already. Now you got to remember, this was written, when this was written, how far back? And it was evident then, and it's even more evident now because sin is reaching its peak. But by the time they start school, they have diseases already. So make sure you mark that down. and then they develop more in school. By the time they're 17 or 18, their bodies are to the point where there are very few of them who can even be picked for a football or basketball team. He says, this is something you've been raised up in. Your bodies are more healthy than those in the world. Now, talking to our young people here, the young men who have been raised in Yahweh's house. This is something you've been raised up in. Your bodies are more healthy than those in the world. Mark this next part down. He says, you can turn to the world and break your body down in just a matter of minutes, days, weeks, or years. Okay, make sure you mark that. Make sure you mark down that you can turn to the world and break your body down. It doesn't take any time at all. It can be done in a matter of it can be done with a single decision that is made poorly. Okay, but mark this next part down too. This next sentence, this next two sentences down. It says, Yahweh promised his people who would come to him, I will take sickness, war, and fighting away from you. I will show you a way of life if you will follow these laws of absolute peace, joy, love, safety, and eternal life. Okay? This is how he takes these things away from us. It's when we follow these simple laws. Yahweh promises his people who would come to him, I will take the sickness, war, and fighting away from you. And I will show you the way of life if you will follow these laws of absolute peace, joy, love, safety, and eternal life. Okay? These are the things that Yahweh promises. He gives you a few of these blessings here. Okay, who's got positive law number 5, Exodus 23:25? Who's got that one?
Positive law number 5, Exodus 23, verse 25. And you shall serve Yahweh your Father, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. Okay.
So did you notice that? It says that he will bless your bread and your water. There's a side note, and I've been loving these side notes are awesome. So make sure that you don't ignore the side notes. But look at the side note there, that G6. When it says, he will bless your bread and your water, he says that is all things necessary in this life. All things necessary. Not all things we want. Not all things we lust after. But all things that are necessary in this life. Okay? Who's got Deuteronomy 32:47? Who's got that one?
These are not just idle words for you. These laws mean life to you, and by them you shall prolong your days in the land which you are crossing the Jordan to possess.
Okay. Praise Yahweh. So notice here he shows that these words, these laws, it's not idle words. The world thinks that these are just idle words. They don't mean anything. But notice it says that these are not idle words to you. They mean life to you. Look at that side note, G9. For I will perform my promises to you. Isaiah 55:10-11. He shows that, that's where he shows that. These laws mean life, that is eternal life. This is the reward. Okay? Now, look at that last note there, that R5. And think about this whole verse and what is said here in R5. It says, it is not for nothing that you are to occupy yourselves laboriously with Yahweh's law, because much reward depends on it. Much reward depends on what? Occupying ourselves laboriously with the laws of Yahweh. And that word laboriously, according to Webster's, it simply means involving or characterized by hard or toilsome effort. In other words, it takes effort. Applying these things and overcoming these things, it's going to take effort. And we have to, it's hard work. It's hard work to overcome these things. But this is what we have to do. We have to make sure that we apply ourselves to these very things here. Now, of course, so we've got those side notes, or we've got those cross-references there. You can also cross-reference Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15-20. And that basically just says that the choice is ours to make. The choice is ours to make, whether we choose life or death. The ball is in our court, so to speak. It is in our hands, but Yahweh begs us to choose life. He says, he pleads with us to choose life. So back to the book now. It says, verse 2, it says, all of these blessings will come upon you. It's not like he's standing there with a bunch of angels, as Elder Shaul brought out the other day in his sermon, with a bunch of cups that have a witch's brew inside to pour out. It's not that way. The way the King James Bible was translated, it seems as if Yahweh is going to have this angel pour out this cup with his blessings of money or health or something. And then this one over here, on the other hand, is going to zonk you on the noggin with curses. It's not that way. It's simply a cause and effect. From the keeping of the law causes the blessings. It also prevents the curses from coming. Okay, verse 3, it says, blessed will you be in your cities and your countries. They're not now. Listen to the daily news, and you will find out that the hatred and violence is filling the streets. Hatred and violence is filling the streets. Matthew 24:7. You can cross-reference that with this one here. Matthew 24:7. Remember, it tells us that nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And there's going to be diseases and pestilences and earthquakes in place after place. So it shows that. And Pastor mentions here, he says, even in a city as small as Abelin, you would think the whole world has gone crazy just by listening to the police reports every morning. And it's gotten worse. Since this sermon was given, since this was written, it's gotten 10 times worse, 100 times worse. We have drive-by shootings, we have robberies, we have people getting killed by the ones that are trying to rob them, and people shot in their own homes. It's going on, Pastor shows, night after night. It's that curse of Cain. The way of continual war, vengeance, and retaliation, which comes from the rejection and the iniquity, the pushing aside of the laws of Yahweh. And remember, that's described, and you can cross-reference, if you want to cross-reference Yada 1:11 with this, so where it talks about the world, they've gone the way of Cain, and that they've run greedily in the error of Balaam for reward, and they've perished in the rebellion of Korah. But, it shows that they've gone that way of Cain. Now, continuing on here, blessed will be the fruit of your body, verse 4, and the produce of your ground. It's not now. The fruit of the body in the world, it's not blessed. The fruit of the ground in the world, it's not blessed either. Any health food book will tell you that the foods we're buying off the shelves are defiled. Proverbs, if you want to cross-reference Proverbs 13:23 with that one. Proverbs 13:23 mentions that a poor man's tilled field may produce abundant food, but injustice destroys it. Okay? Injustice. The doing away with the just laws of Yahweh, the violating of those laws, has brought the curses upon even the soil, even the crops. Now, the newspaper reports are telling it too. They finally are having to admit that even the fresh vegetables that we buy in the grocery stores are defiled. They're taking certain precautions. Down at the end of each food line, they have a vinegar cleaner, and they say, don't eat this food until you put it in your basket without spraying it with this solution to kill the parasites on it. Well, we've been practicing that for years by koshering everything that we purchase with salt water. Making sure, going through that process to making sure that we're getting it as clean as we possibly can. And if you want to cross-reference Isaiah 24:5 with this one. And look how Isaiah 24:5 reads, the earth is defiled under the inhabitants of it, because they have transgressed the laws, because the inhabitants have transgressed the laws, they've changed the ordinances, and they've broken the everlasting covenant. The inhabitants, because the inhabitants have defiled it. That side note there, Pastor shows, is where it shows iniquity shall abound and the love of the many will grow cold, out of Matthew 24:12. Okay? So continuing on, back into the book here. We're back down to, we've told you for years now that you need to be koshering this in this salt water. I don't even know if it's fit then. It's probably not. He says we're probably getting a certain amount of poisons even at that time. The meats and everything in the markets are contaminated. We don't have a blessing upon the ground. We've brought our earth to the ground. The ground to where it's crying out in pain, like the people are crying out in pain. The earth is crying out. The microorganisms, and that even makes more sense, and it's even deeper now. because we're understanding more and more about the microorganisms and about how these things are put together. The next verse down here, it shows, and the young of your livestock. There was a magazine given to me yesterday with an article that a scientist wrote on mad cow disease, showing that there's no escaping it. And that was in the Guardian. That's a picture of it was a 9/22 of 2001, an epidemic in waiting. And you really can't, it's kind of hard to read that. But just this little blurb here, I'm going to read that to you here. It says, there is no cure for it, no vaccine, no test. What we know about BSE, that's, I'm not even going to try to pronounce what that is. Bovine spongiform encephalopathy, I think is how it's pronounced, is that most of Britain's 60 million population has been exposed to it. We know that its human form, CJD or Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, has so far claimed 106 lives in Britain. 5 of them in one village. We don't know. What we don't know is how the humans contract the disease, or how long the incubation period is, and how far the government is to blame. And this individual investigates a political time bomb. So, of course, Pastor knows and brought out how these things were transmitted, how they were created, and how they're transmitted to mankind. But it's shown here that it shows here that there's no escaping it, not in the world, because it's getting out. It's finding its way even into the livestock, into the wildlife. But Pastor shows here, he says, left to itself, there's no way to stop it. Even by itself, notice here, underline this next part, this mad cow disease, underline mad cow disease, 2 lines above that. Mad cow disease would eventually wipe out mankind. Okay, highlight that. Mad cow disease would eventually wipe out mankind. All cattle and almost everything. The calves of your herd and the lambs of your flock are now contaminated. Okay, and we see that in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Remember, Deuteronomy chapter 28 covers it covers the curses that come from the violation or the transgression of Yahweh's law. And I just want to read here verse 15. It says, however, Deuteronomy 28:15 says, however, if you do not obey Yahweh your Father, and do not carefully follow all of his laws and his statutes, which the world has not, then all of these curses will come upon you and will accompany you. If you don't follow these things, if you violate these laws, not that somebody's sending these curses down, but breaking these laws is going to bring about this result. The judgments are set. This is why Yahweh warns us. Our loving Heavenly Father is warning us and warning the world, warning mankind not to violate these laws. Because doing so, you will bring harm upon yourself. And this is repeated over and over and over again. Now, the King James Version, of course, we know has got that totally twisted around, that totally messed around. But with the book of Yahweh and with each sermon that goes forth from our pastor, with every writing, with every sermon, with every broadcast, that is being corrected. Okay? So notice here, it says, the next verse down here, it says, by following this law, as Yahweh said, these simple guides could then keep your livestock healthy. These simple guides, there's nothing difficult about these laws. There's nothing difficult about properly caring for our animals, and about properly caring for ourselves, and about proper relationships between men and women. Between brothers and sisters. There is no harm that is brought about by following these laws. Psalm 19:7, if you want to cross-reference that, remember the laws of Yahweh are perfect. They will convert the whole person, convert us to perfection. And, these laws, they're not difficult. They're not beyond our reach. They're right here. It's not anything that has to be searched out for, gone overseas and just, really dug into. Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 11 shows that they're not hidden, nor it's beyond our reach. They're right in front of us. They've been given to us. And then again in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 4 through 5. Blessed will you be in the fruit of your body, the produce of your ground, and the young of your livestock, and the calves of your herds, and the lambs of your flocks. And blessed will be your basket and your storehouse. So, we see those blessings and stuff that will come. Now, continuing on here, and by following these laws, Pastor shows here, now underline this next part. Underline this next part. It says, that is a sensible thing, and that is what the kingdom of Yahweh is about. It's about sensible laws that actually reverse the destruction and the defilement that we're seeing in the world today. Okay? That is a sensible thing. Look at what this word sensible means. Look at what this word sensible means. It means practical or functional according to Google. Okay, according to Merriam-Webster.com, it means having, containing, or indicative of great sense or reason. It's rational, it's reasonable. It's designed for practical ends rather than for appearance. So these laws, are designed because they have a practical end. There's a reason that they're given to us. It's not just for show. It's not there just because it's there. It's there because it benefits mankind. It's there because it benefits us. It's there because it benefits the microorganisms. It's there because everybody benefits from that. And it shows here it says that it will reverse and it will turn it around. It will reverse it and turn it around with a kingdom which will push this and have the power to back it up. So in Deuteronomy chapter 28, and I think that was where I got off. Yep, that's where I got off. I had a slide out of order. Okay, in Deuteronomy, no, I didn't either. Darn it. Technology is great when it works. I guess the operator here is having a little bit more difficulty than anything. But we'll take a look there in Deuteronomy, cross-reference that, let's see, in 10 here. Deuteronomy 28, 45, 59, and 60. We can cross-reference that there if you want to. Where it talks about these curses will come upon you. The curses that we've covered so far. These curses will come upon you and will pursue you and will overtake you until you are destroyed. And notice it's simply because you simply did not obey. Okay? It's because you simply did not obey the voice of Yahweh your Father to keep his laws and his statutes which he commanded you. Then Yahweh will bring upon you and your descendants fearful plagues, or these things are going to come upon us as we saw through being passed down through the DNA from generation to generation. Okay? Okay, so about the middle of the page, a little bit below the middle of the page here where it says, the power you will receive if you will yield yourselves to Yahweh is tremendous. Now think about that. Think about what Pastor's telling us here. This power, the power you will receive if you will yield yourself to Yahweh, it's tremendous. It brings to mind, Romans 6:19. Where it says, where he says, I put this in human terms because of your natural limitations. For just as you are used to offer your members for just as you used to offer the members of your body as servants of uncleanness and of sin, which leads to more sin, so now yield yourselves as servants to righteousness and holiness. Okay? So we're being told here we need to repent, we need to turn. We're putting away this old man, and remember that's what our baptism pictures is, putting to death that old man and coming up new and coming up with a coming up new. Now in Leviticus 20 verse 7 is the law that ties in with that, and you can see there it says, consecrate and sanctify yourselves. Therefore be holy, for I am Yahweh your Father. Okay? Consecrate and sanctify yourselves. We have to consecrate, we have to sanctify ourselves through the law of Yahweh in order to qualify in order to have this power that Pastor is talking about here, that he's describing. And it's like moving mountains or moving planets here, okay? But that side note there where it says R3, it says to keep aloof from all adultery. And I had to look up aloof to see what that meant. And that means to remove or distance yourselves either physically or emotionally. And actually it's to distance ourselves both physically and emotionally from sin and those who insist on practicing sin. Okay, because remember what the scripture tells us. Bad company does what? Praise Yahweh. It corrupts righteous character. And let me see here. Okay, so we're looking at that the power we're going to receive if we yield to Yahweh. Who's got Yada? Oh, chapter 1, verse 3. Who's got that one?
Yada 1:3. Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write to you about the common salvation, I found it necessary to write to you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once and for all delivered to the saints.
Okay. So that faith, or to earnestly contend, and I've got that bolded because look how seriously that we are to earnestly contend for what the things that are written according to what Malachi 4:5 tells us, what's written in the law and the prophets, all things written in the law and the prophets. But that earnestly contend, earnestly means in a serious manner, not lightly, not casually, or flippantly. And flippantly, it just means lacking proper respect or seriousness. But we have to, in a very serious manner, contend. We have to strive against the difficulties. We have to strive against the struggles. And that's what we battle with daily. That's what we're battling with in our minds and the carnal mind. We're battling that. We're battling these old habits. We're battling all of these things that we grew up in. If you weren't brought up here in Yahweh's house, but we're battling these things in order to be able to qualify for this power that Pastor's showing here. Like moving mountains or moving planets. It's mind. It just boggles the mind that we're being given the opportunity for this. And he shows that we're very insignificant. He shows we're very insignificant compared to some of the angels who have power over certain elements like the wind and the rain. This insignificant, it can simply mean, of a person that doesn't have power, a person without power or influence. It shows that they have that kind of power. He says, we don't have it. Yahweh showed through Yeshua that we would receive it one day because Yeshua certainly had it. Yeshua had that power. He had that power. He had that authority. If you think about what's written in, just think about Yachanan 21:6, just as an example, where Yeshua told him to cast the net on the right side of the boat, and there's nothing on one side. He told him throw it over on the other side, and on the one side they came up empty, but when they were obedient and they followed through and did what they were told to do, they had this. An abundance of fish that almost sank the boat. You think about the acts of power that were described in like Yachanan chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, and just kind of cross-reference those. The Yeshua's first act of power was changing water into wine. In Matthew 8:23 through 32, where it talks about, where he had control over where the microorganisms, the calming of the storm. Where the waves of the sea and the wind, they obeyed him. The microorganisms, they did that. And even with the demons, that were ordered to, the demons in the herd of swine, showing that the power the power and the authority he had over the spirit beings, over the principalities of darkness. You look at that. You look at that power demonstrated. And Yeshua shows that if we apply ourselves, we can also have that, that and more, that authority, So, this is why the testings we go through, men, are they're so severe, and they're difficult. They're difficult. It's because of this authority and the authority that we're going to be given. We have to prove ourselves that we're not going to turn to the left or to the right. Okay? Yahweh has to know that it's going to be done, used righteously. Now, we will, I'm hoping by Pentecost, if everyone will concentrate on righteousness, even the children, the young men and the young women, Yahweh says that even the young men and the women will receive power. Now, mark this next part down, highlight it. He says, for before this thing is over, they're going to receive a certain amount of power that will actually be seen and heard from others. You can too, but not if you yield to the unrighteousness around you. It won't mix. The power won't mix with it. This power, this stuff is going to be, it's going to be given. Acts 2:17 talks about the young men will prophesy and the old men will dream dreams. And it's very important that we see here that the power, that this authority is not going to mix with unrighteousness. It won't mix. There's no way that it can. And this, again, is the reason for the testings and the trials that we are going through. But down toward the bottom of the page here, it says, Yahweh will establish you as his holy people. You can cross-reference with that Exodus 19:5 and Deuteronomy 7:6. Right there. Exodus 19:5, where it talks about that we will be a special treasure above all people to Yahweh, and Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. You can cross-reference that there also. It says that would be a fulfillment that we are going to see to ourselves at the end of this 42 moons of war, after he's proven what takes place if you don't follow, the simple guides. And this is what the earth is going to be brought to. The earth is going to be brought to this destruction. See, if I could just one more time tell you the simple guide about fornication. It is a sin. It is a sin against your own body, as one of the apostles said. He said that was 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18. If you want to cross-reference that. It's a sin against your own body. It will destroy your body. Remember, like we mentioned last week, you might think you got away with something. We're not getting away with anything. It will destroy your body if you yield to it now. Now, notice the severity Pastor shows here. He says, if you will yield to it now, it will destroy your hopes of being a part of this kingdom and having eternal life. That is your choice, because Yahweh says to choose. Okay? Again, remember, Yahweh wants a kingdom. He wants a kingdom of volunteers. He wants people to choose righteousness. And this is, this is what he wants. He says to choose this day the way that you want to go. And remember, that was in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. He says, I'm telling you, you're going to run out of time. If you don't pay attention to me, you're going to be very sorry here in the very near future, before you even have time to grow up and experience the goofy things that the world is offering to you right now. We don't want to be a part of that world, men. You young men, we don't want to be a part of it at all. There is nothing beneficial out there. You have everything that you could possibly desire right here. Everything. Verse 9, he will establish you. If you will keep these, that is his first promise in Genesis, that he will establish you. He will establish you as his holy people. A holy people are the ones who will follow the laws of health, who do not eat pork, who do not drink blood, who will sprinkle salt on all of their sacrifices. Okay? That is all part of holiness and loving it. Loving to follow this way, because that brings you what you want, that brings you what you really want in life. Remember, Leviticus chapter 11 talks about about food, about the clean food and the unclean food. Deuteronomy chapter 12 as well, talks about not eating the blood. Boy, there's all kinds of cross-reference. There's all kinds of things that we can cross-reference here. But continuing on down here in the next paragraph, it says, I don't think anyone really wants their bodies to be wrecked. We don't. I don't think anyone really wants AIDS, syphilis, chlamydia, gonorrhea, or any of the stupid stuff that the world is plagued with. Or any of the stupid stuff that this world is plagued with. This world is plagued with some nasty, nasty, nasty stuff, man. Again, you can see, cross-reference Matthew 24:7, where it talks about how nation will rise against nation, and it talks about these disease epidemics out there. Yahweh has promised to take these things away from you and anyone else who will follow these laws. Okay? And that's what these laws do, man. Psalm 91:10 shows, no evil will befall you, nor will any plague come upon your dwelling. It's because in keeping these laws of Yahweh, there's protection. That's where our protection comes from. It comes from the obedience to these laws. Okay? That is what is going to protect us. Continuing on down, establishing you. This is going to be at the end of this time when Yahshua and the kingdom comes. Verse 14, if you will diligently observe to do all of Yahweh's laws, then you will not turn aside from the laws which I command you this day to the right hand or the left hand by going after gods to serve them. Going after gods. These are the same angels, brethren, that brought the earth to the corruption here in Genesis chapter 1. Remember Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Remember that side note. Remember that how darkness was on the face of the deep. And remember what those side notes. Go back to that side note and see what that side note, show how that side note reads. Okay, the history of all that is true. The layers of the earth and the archaeological diggings prove it true. Even the flood that he brought was proven true. We have a true history here to guide us that we can actually go and believe. That we can actually go and believe. Okay? Look at 1 Corinthians 14:22. Let's go to the overhead real quick. Therefore, it says, other languages are for a sign, not to those who believe, but to those who do not believe. However, notice this, that prophecy is for the believers. Not for the believers. Okay? Pastor for years, from as long as I can remember, said if somebody is not willing to accept the Sabbath in Yahweh's name, don't have any further discussion with them. Okay? Because you can you could put out prophecy after prophecy after prophecy and show them, but they're not going to believe it. They have to believe the basics. They have to believe the Sabbath. They have to believe Yahweh's name. If they can't grasp those two, how are they going to grasp the deeper things of Yahweh? There's absolutely no way that they can. In fact, we're told to not cast our pearls before swine, right? Well, these prophecies are pearls of wisdom to us. And if we try to put those out to somebody that doesn't want to hear them or isn't called, then they can take those things and turn around and they will rend you with them. They will ridicule them. They will try to use them against you. It's simple. If they don't understand the name of Yahweh, if they can't accept the name Yahweh, and if they can't accept the Sabbath, then that's it. Okay? Okay. So the next verse down here, it says, verse 15, however, if you do not obey Yahweh, if you do not follow these laws, these statutes, then these curses here will come upon you. And we can see them very well in the world today. Okay, we can see them out in the world today. Yahweh will afflict you. And that's the way it's written. And it looks like Yahweh has this angel up there and he's saying, afflict him now, and he did this, and he broke my word, and now I'm mad at him. Remember, that's not the way it is. Okay, that's the way the Catholic Church wants us to think. That Yahweh is a mean old God. That's how they want us to look. They want us to look at him and in that manner. But it's not that way. Remember, Yahweh is a loving heavenly Father, and he warns us of these things. It says, and that is what Satan and the Catholic Church want you to think. Highlight this next part. Okay? Highlight this next part. They want you to think that we have a mad God up there who is about ready to torture the earth, but Queen Mary is the Queen of Peace. And she can unruffle his feathers and calm him down and talk him out of this mess that he's going to bring upon the earth. Okay? So highlight that, because that's what they want you to believe. They want you to think that, well, Mary is the intercessor. She can calm him down. She can calm him down. Oh, you really don't want to do that to those poor people down there. You really don't want to do that to them. That's what they want you to think. But that's nothing. That couldn't be further from the truth. It says, Yahweh has been trying to point this out to mankind. He is getting the ones he wants out of the world, and he's forming a kingdom of them. Okay? Remember the plan of Yahweh in Yachanan 1:1-5? Remember, in the beginning was the plan of Yahweh, right? And the plan was with Yahweh, and the plan was Yahweh's, and the same plan was in the beginning with Yahweh, remember? And all things were done according to it, as nothing was done that was done. And in this plan was life, and that life was light to mankind. Now, remember what Pastor said here. He says that he's pulling those out of the kingdom. Remember, nobody can come to Yahweh unless they are drawn. Nobody can come to Yahweh's house unless they're called. And he shows here in Yachanan 1:5, it says, now that light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not take hold of it. And if you think about the light, what is the light of the world? What is it? Praise Yahweh. The laws. Remember, the laws are a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. So the laws are being taught. By who? Praise Yahweh. They're being taught by this last day's house. These laws are being taught in this world that's filled with what? Darkness, with sin, misery, death, with corrupt minds. And a population of a multitude of corrupt minds, of death and destruction. But these minds, these minds that have this death and destruction, these corrupt minds, they don't take hold of it. But this light still shines forth. Why? Because Yahweh's pulling a remnant out of this world, and this remnant is being brought to Yahweh's house at this time. It's actively being done. You remember Yeshua said you don't light a lamp and then hide it under a basket. All right, but you set it up on a hill so that it shines out, so that all who see that light can come to it. And this is what is taking place. Those who are being called out of this world of darkness now, are being brought into Yahweh's house. And this is how this kingdom is being formed. This remnant is being gathered together now. Okay? There are 7 judgments that the kingdom of heaven is actually allowing to come upon this earth as a historical reference for all Malachim and all the people who have ever lived and who will all live. Verse 27, Yahweh will allow this. He will allow you to have these diseases. He will allow you to have, these diseases of Egypt. They were suffering the same things in Egypt because of these illicit lives that they were living. Okay? They weren't living by the laws of Yahweh. They are the same things that they're suffering now. Only now they're worse. Because they're spreading them with airplanes, and they take people from here and there, and they're spreading it worldwide. You think about just the increase in technology over the past 100 years, and how travel, how quickly you can travel from point A to point B now. You can travel halfway around the world in how long? 12 to 18 hours? You can be halfway around the world. So just think about how long a sickness, somebody with the flu or with some other type of upper respiratory disease, breathing, for 12 to 18 hours in an airplane, sealed airplane, infecting hundreds of people, exposing hundreds of people, and now these hundreds of people are going out once they get to their destination. You can see how quickly these things spread, okay? But these tumors, this is a growing thing. They're caused because we break the laws of Yahweh. They don't come upon us because God got mad at us and sprinkled us with a cancer virus. That's what they want you to think. They are caused by not following simple laws that Yahweh said would keep you from these diseases. Okay? Simple. Remember, we covered simple last time. Simple simply means easily understood or done, presenting no difficulty. Okay? You can cross-reference Isaiah 24:5 there, where, again, it talks about the earth is defiled under the inhabitants of it because they transgressed the laws, they changed the ordinance, and they broke the everlasting covenant. Remember, that's why these diseases, a curse causeless, remember, will not come. Yes, they had them in Egypt. Back to the book. Yes, they had them in Egypt. They brought them out of it and said, this is the way to health. These laws are the way to health and fitness. Going back to Deuteronomy chapter 28, now going back to these tumors, these festering sores. I mean, just the words, the words, they just sound disgusting. You know, festering sores, highlight that. Tumor, that festering sores, highlight those. Doesn't that sound disgusting? I mean, just think about what that brings to your mind. I brought a bunch out because these festering sores are prevalent today and are caused by sexually transmitted diseases. Highlight that. Highlight these tumors and festering sores are caused by sexually transmitted diseases. Okay? What does the world promote today? They promote sexual promiscuity. That is what is promoted out in the world. It's promoted out in the workplace. If you're here a part of the work of Yahweh and you're blessed to be a part of this work and you're working in the work, you have no idea how blessed you are not to be exposed to that stuff. Okay? Because when this stuff gets in your mind, when you see these things, once something enters into the mind, we know from our previous experiences how difficult it can be to push these things out. But if you prevent yourself from seeing them in the first place, you don't have to worry about that so much. Okay? But about 90% of the diseases are caused by acts of fornication or adultery that are taking place in the world. Okay? And this brings to mind the things written in Leviticus chapter 18, all those prohibited relationships that are in there. It talks about the defilement it talks about the what's the word I'm thinking of? The abominations and becoming abominable. It talks about all of those things that become a part of that. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, it says that you shall not commit adultery. Okay, what the world refers to as the 10 Commandments. Okay, Leviticus 20, verse 10, it talks about the same thing. It's talking about adultery. In prohibitive law number 355, Leviticus 19:29, it talks about prostituting your daughter, causing her to become a harlot. So, this is, we guard our families, man. We're here, we're guardians. Just as pastor guards the house of Yahweh, we're to be guardians and guards over our own families. But notice here that these, from which you cannot be healed. Notice the tumors and festering sores. Notice the severity here, from which you cannot be healed. Yes, there is no way that Satan can find a cure for these diseases to protect mankind. There's absolutely no way that Satan can find a cure for these diseases to protect mankind. What's Satan trying to do? Is she trying to protect mankind? What's she trying to do to him? Praise Yahweh, trying to destroy him. Who's got Jeremiah chapter 30, verses 12 through 15? Who's got that?
For this is Yahweh. This is what Yahweh says. Your affliction is incurable. Your wound is severe. There is no one to plead your cause, that you might be bound up, treated. You have no healing medicine. All your lovers have forgotten you. They do not see you, for I have wounded you with the wound of an enemy, with the fierceness and chastisement, for the multitude of your iniquities, because of your sins have increased. Why do you cry about your afflictions? Your disease is incurable because of the multitude of your iniquities, because your sins have increased. I have done these things to you.
Praise Yahweh. So remember, when it says in there that I have caused these things, I have done these things to you, No, it's, remember, mankind has done these things to themselves. Okay? Mankind has done those things to themselves because of their rebellion, because of the way that they've chosen to live, the path that they've chosen. And that's not even the worst of it, Pastor shows here. He says the worst of it is still yet to come. A book was handed to me this morning and that I didn't get very deep into it, but the man was talking about germ and biological warfare and how it not only affects the body, but it affects the mind also. You know, so you look at the diseases that mankind is breeding intentionally to be used as weapons of war. I mean, you look at the sick mind that sin has bred. And if you want to cross-reference Revelation chapter 9, verses 3 through 6, and that talks about this warfare. But this germ biological warfare are just taking the same diseases that we've created in our bodies and spreading them with a super dispersant out on nations, peoples, and tongues. Then those same people get it and take it from country to country and spread it even more. It's getting worse, brethren. Anyone who pays attention to the news can see it, and it won't go much further. Okay, now highlight this next part here. It says there are about 6 things right now that could wipe out mankind and all the animals. He says they're all prevalent in the world today, and any one of them can do it. So what are some of these 6 things here? When we use nuclear bombs. So, highlight that. There are 6 things right now that could wipe out mankind and all the animals, and we see here nuclear bombs. There will be few survivors left. Revelation, and you can cross-reference Revelation 6:12 with that. You can cross-reference Isaiah 24:6. So we got Revelation 6:12, Isaiah 24:6, and you can even cross-reference Isaiah 34, verse 4. Okay? And Pastor shows, he says, when these bombs are used that darken the sun, there will still be few survivors left. It would not be if Yahweh didn't give power to a certain people. If certain people did not make it coming into this kingdom, it wouldn't save mankind. We are going to have to turn this thing around after this takes place. Isaiah 58:12 shows that those of you will rebuild the old waste places. Okay, and it talks about being the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in, about the repairing that's going to be taking place. We are going to have to turn this thing around after that takes place. We will have to clean up the earth and make it livable before we are ever given power over the universe.